Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the High Vibe Tribe podcast. I, of course, am Marcy Neumann, your host, the Heart Shift Coach, and I have a wonderful, wonderful coach and author and soulmate of mine, Margaret Paul. Soulmate, because we're going to be talking about what you know is my favorite subject, self-love. And so before we dive into that, I want to tell you a little bit more about Margaret. But before I do, Margaret, could I officially welcome you to this very sacred space where we talk about the most intimate things that are in relation to how we can be living full on the greatest expression of ourselves, and of course, even more. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Marcy. I've been looking forward to this time with you.
Well, I know we're going to have a good time. Like I said to our audience, we're going to be talking about self-love and some wonderful information that Margaret has to share about a very special program that she's developed. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about Margaret's background and why I thought it was so important that she's here. And of course, why she was my choice to bring in speaking about self-love. So, Dr. Margaret Paul is a best-selling author, popular mind-body green writer, and co-creator of the powerful inner bonding self-healing process. And you are going to hear more about that. Also, the related Self Quest, which is a self-healing online program. And it's been recommended by actress Lindsay Wagner and singer Alanis Morissette. She has appeared on numerous radio and television shows, including Our Dear Oprah. Her book titles include Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by You? And subsequent titles, Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by God? And Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by My Kids? Something I can relate to, Margaret. Also, Healing Your Aloneness and Inner Bonding, and the recently published Diet for Divine Connection and the Inner Bonding Workbook. Margaret holds a PhD in psychology, a relationship expert, a public speaker, consultant, and artist. She has successfully worked with thousands and taught classes and seminars for over 50 years. So, Margaret, again, welcome. And I can't wait to dive in, if that's okay with you, because I want to take advantage of every moment that I have with you. And I know that our audience feels the same. So, we told everyone we're going to be talking about self-love. I have to ask you, because I know, and I'm sure that you come across this all the time, there's so much confusion in the world about what self-love is. So when you're speaking to people, how do you describe what self-love is?
Well, I mean, self-love can be on many levels. Most people, when they think of self-love, they think of the physical level. You know, they're going to eat well, they're going to get enough sleep, exercise, get their nails done, take a bath, whatever. And, you know, then, of course, there's the financial level, organizational level, spiritual level, relational level. Inner bonding is a lot about taking emotional responsibility for ourselves, which is something that most people have no idea how to do, because we had very, very few role models, if any, of people actually taking responsibility for their own feelings. And most of us grew up without anybody attending to our feelings. And so we learn to avoid them, which is what I call self-abandonment. It's the opposite of emotional self-love. So today we'll probably focus on emotional self-love, since a lot of people know what the other levels are about, but that most people don't know anything about emotional self-love.
I think you're right on, you know, and I think essentially like what you've described is this, you know, this incredible wide spectrum, right, of how self-love can be manifested.
Right.
But I love so much how you really just sort of lasered in with that focus about self-love being, in essence, taking responsibility for one's emotional well-being.
Mm.
And I can tell you, just, from my own perspective, that I know that there have been many pivotal points in my life where it just was like front and center, right? All
Right.
right, girl, you need to take care of this. And there is something here that's asking to be healed.
Right.
So, do you have moments like that that you're willing to share with our audience? And I think that this is so helpful for us because, again, the call for this deep self love comes to us in so many different ways. How did it happen for you?
Well, like so many people, I was brought up in a dysfunctional family. My parents were narcissistic. They had no idea how to take responsibility for their own feelings. They blamed each other. I was an only child. They blamed me. I was very much alone. I learned to be a caretaker, to be tuned into their feelings for my own safety and well-being, but not to my own. And so I grew up being very anxious and often depressed. And that anxiety is what drove me into looking, for how do you deal with that? What do you do with anxiety? When I was 5, I was such an anxious kid that my mother took me to a psychiatrist, and thinking that my anxiety was my fault rather than her, because she was a screamer. She would rage at me all the time. Of course, that's going to cause a kid anxiety.
Yeah.
And the psychiatrist told me to tell her not to yell at me. And I remember thinking at 5 very clearly, I'm only 5. You tell her, she's not going to listen to me. And then I thought, I could do a better job than you. And that's when I decided to do the work that I do. And I had all kinds of therapy. And then I became a traditional psychotherapist for 17 years. And I didn't like that either. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for my clients. And that's when I started to pray for a process that would work fast and deep. And I met Dr. Erica Chopich. She's the co-creator of Inner Bonding. She had half the process. I had half the process. Of course, Spirit made sure we met and brought it down. And since then, that was 35 years ago. Since then, my whole life has changed. That's when I learned what I was doing that was causing the anxiety, how I was treating myself, how I was abandoning myself, that made me feel so alone inside and so anxious inside. And since then, I mean, it's been a whole other life since I started practicing inner bonding. And I've been able to help so many, actually hundreds of thousands of people around the world who have been able to get off medications and everything because they learned how to take responsibility for their anxiety, their depression, guilt and shame and anger and aloneness and emptiness and jealousy and all of these feelings that they didn't realize that they were mostly causing, but also to learn how to compassionately take care of what I call the existential life feelings, like loneliness and grief over loss and helplessness over others and heartbreak over not being loved and seeing each other hurt each other. So these are the feelings that when we were little we had no way to manage. Most of us had a lot of heartbreak and a lot of fear of real and present danger and a lot of feelings of helplessness. So of course we had to disconnect from our feelings. We couldn't manage them. But now we can learn to manage those feelings, and we can learn to tune into what we've been doing to cover over those feelings that are now causing the feelings like anxiety and depression.
I sort of hung on the words when you said you prayed for a process. So, in your perspective, would you say that self-love is a spiritual process, a spiritual journey?
Well, what I would say is that since we don't have many actual role models in our society, in order to know what's loving to ourselves, we have to be able to access a higher source of information, of truth, of guidance. And this became apparent as we were creating the inner bonding process, that we needed a way to access that information, because otherwise, I mean, people say, I don't know how to love myself. And I said, I don't know how to love myself. How do I figure that out? So now I learned how, well, then I learned how to access that higher source. And I teach people how to do that all the time. It's not as hard as people think. And then we can get that role modeling, that guidance for what's actually emotionally loving to ourselves, as well as physically and financially and all those other levels.
Yeah, I think it's such an important aspect of addressing self-love, energetically, physically, mentally, emotionally. And of course, this spiritual part of it, I think, is one of the aspects that's really essential because, like you said, it's so important to rise above, right, where we are, and to be able to tap in, to tune into that other energy that can actually give us the guidance and the information that we need. It's interesting. What came to my mind was, and this was one of the first realizations that I had, that self-love was an issue for me. And that was back in the early 70s. I had just graduated from nursing school, and I was also in an ordination program to become a spiritualist minister. And so it was one of our Friday night classes, and it was my birthday. And after the class, my friend said, oh, are you going to stay for coffee and cake? And I said, no, I'm really tired. I'm going to go home. And I could see this look of, oh, God, now what do I do, on her face. And she leaned over and whispered in my ear, we've arranged a little surprise party for you.
Oh.
And I remember being like a deer in headlights. And I turned to her and I said, I'm so sorry, but I really have to go.
Oh my
Can
goodness.
you imagine? And
Oh.
so I walked out, and I'm walking down the street when all of a sudden, honestly, it was like something just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I said, oh my God. And I seriously said, how do I heal this? Because I realized in that moment that I was not allowing myself to receive
Right.
that love. My heart wasn't open to receiving, and I knew that that had something to do with me.
Right.
And it was almost like this instantaneous realization, right? I must not think that I'm worth it. And I said again, how do I heal this? And I got that message right then and there. About face, turn around and head right back. And I did.
Oh,
I
wow.
walked back in, and I just, I apologized, and I said, I am so grateful for everything that you've done. And we had the most wonderful night. And
Oh,
it's so painful to think about what would have been, right, if I hadn't done that. But so important, as you said, Margaret, to reach up, right? And to give yourself that opportunity to connect with something higher than yourself.
right. And
So,
also to reach in, because
yes.
you realize that you were in pain as a result. And if you think about your feeling self as an inner child, and let's say you had an actual child who people were going to celebrate her for her birthday, and you said, no, you don't deserve to be celebrated.
Right.
Oh my God, that would have felt so horrible to that inner child. And it did. And she let you know, and you
She
listened.
sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, um, this is such an important point, I think, for our listeners to understand. And it is a bit of a paradox, isn't it, Margaret? So we like are raising our awareness, but we are going in. So it's higher, but we go in to get higher. And it's so, this whole process, is that what you find with when you're teaching inner bonding? Is this also that same mechanism?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I teach is that it's our soul. That's who we really are, and that's our inner soul. The part of our soul that's in our body often communicates through our feelings, and the part of our soul that's all around us, the spiritual higher aspect, that part isn't in our body, but it communicates with us often through through thoughts, through images. So I picture that the soul is very big and we're inside our soul and our soul is inside of us. And we have these two aspects of our soul that we can listen to. So I listen inside with my feelings, and then I listen to my higher guidance as well. Like if I have a decision to make, for example,
Yeah.
go in and say, well, how do you feel? And I'm going to tune into what I feel about it. And then I'm going to go to my higher guidance and say, well, what's in my highest good? What's loving to me? And when those two line up, which doesn't take me very long, maybe a couple of minutes, I have my decision. I make decisions really fast at this point because I've learned to trust my feelings and trust my higher guidance, which most people don't do. I had no trust for my feelings until I started to practice inner bonding, because when I was growing up, I would have a feeling. I would say something like to my mother, why are you angry with me? And she'd say, I'm not angry. And so, or she'd say, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can't trust my feelings.
Right.
So it was a whole learning process. And this is a major part of the inner bonding process of learning to tune in to our feelings, learning to learn about what they're telling us because they have so much information for us. And then learning to open to that higher level of information and access what's truly in our highest good.
Oh, I love so much what you just were sharing. And what you're describing is kind of like a numbing that takes place in childhood, right? And actually is probably perpetuated in many ways as we go throughout our lives.
Right.
What are some of the repercussions of that numbing that you see in your field?
Well, there's, I mean, when we abandon ourselves, which we do, I have found 4 ways that people basically use to abandon themselves. They stay up in their head and just disconnect from their body. We all learn to do that, to sort of dissociate from our body where our feelings are. We've learned to judge ourselves, which makes us feel, shame and guilt. We've learned to turn to various addictions to numb out. We all know about that. And we've also learned to make other people responsible for our feelings. And there's huge repercussions on our health and well-being, where we're disconnecting from the information that we need. We're numbing out with various substances, which can cause enormous health problems. And then in relationships, we're making the other person responsible. And of course, we attract at our common level of self-abandonment or our common level of self-love. And so if people are abandoning themselves, they're going to attract somebody else who's abandoning themselves. And then what happens is that they're entering the relationship to try and get love because they don't have any love inside. They're abandoning themselves. The other person is doing the same thing. And when we abandon ourselves, we don't have love to share with anybody. We're kind of empty inside. We're numbed out, and we're expecting the other person to complete us and to make us feel alive and worthwhile. Well, of course, we know those relationships don't work. Eventually, they fall apart. Whereas once we learn to love ourselves and we get to fill ourselves up with love, then we can approach another person not with the intention to get love, but with the intention to share love. And that's completely different. That is, in my experience, the most joyous experience in life. But we don't have love to share when we're not loving ourselves. And so one of the huge repercussions is relationship problems. And then, of course, like I said, another huge one is probably health problems. There's a lot of illness that comes about, a lot of stress we cause with self-abandonment, as well as not taking care of ourselves physically because we don't think that we're worth taking care of. So there's so many negative repercussions to not loving ourselves.
All right, I have so many questions that are coming up. First one. So let's talk about your inner bonding program again.
Yeah.
Is this something that you would recommend that couples could do together, or is it more of an individualized program?
Oh, it's either one. Couples can do it together, and that's great when they do it together. They develop the same language. They can be there to support and help each other. But it's also great for people to do it individually, even if they're in a relationship. And if their partner doesn't want to do it, one of the things that I've seen over and over is if one person does their own inner work, they can have a huge positive effect on the relationship, because relationships become a system. It's like, a typical system is, let's say one person is angry, another person is withdrawn. And the more one gets angry, the more the other withdraws. And the more the one withdraws, the more the other one gets angry. And that's a system. And it doesn't work, obviously. And so when one person does their inner work to change the system, the whole system changes. Now, sometimes it'll get worse, and then this relationship isn't going to work. But actually, most of the time with the people I work with, it gets better. Even if the other person doesn't look like they're doing their inner work, they might be doing it in a way that the other person doesn't realize. And so I say, yeah, do it as a couple, do it individually, but do it. We all need to be doing our inner work.
Yeah. And this is not a one-time shot, right? This is an ongoing process.
Yeah, this is like, like I say, if you have a baby, you don't expect to just take the baby, for a week or something, it's the rest of your life. This is about developing new neural pathways in your brain for what we call in inner bonding, the loving adult. Because in inner bonding, there's only two intentions. Either at any given moment, your intention is to control and avoid and protect against pain, or your intention is to learn about loving yourself and sharing your love with others. And so in the inner bonding process, the more you practice doing, it's a 6-step process. And the more you practice these 6 steps, the more you develop the neural pathways for the intention to learn about love, which we call the loving adult. We've all got an ego wounded part of us. And that's the part of us that's intent on controlling and avoiding pain at all costs, and will do anything to avoid and control and protect against getting hurt. But everything we've learned to do, like I said, that we're protecting against pain causes us pain, because all the ways we try to avoid, like all those ways of abandoning, cause us pain. And so as people learn to open to learning instead of protecting and controlling and avoiding, and to take loving action for themselves, they actually develop new neural pathways. The recent research on the brain says we have neuroplasticity, and we can train the brain at any age. It doesn't matter how old we are. Our brain is always capable of learning. And so as we practice this process over time, we develop those neural pathways, and life changes. It's just like having a baby. When I had my first child, being an only child, I hadn't been around kids. I didn't really know much about parenting. But over time, over practicing being a parent, I learned to be a better and better parent. And that's what happens on the inner level.
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. And I love that whole analogy, by the way, because I think that is something that in this society in particular, right, where it's immediate gratification and, all right, let me do this so I can get on and do other things.
Yeah.
And it's such an important aspect that there's no greater investment in yourself than to do this work where you become, as you described, right, Margaret, so keenly aware of when you need to pull yourself back, when you need to come back into your heart, when you need to love that child within you, and have had so much experience at this point, we might even say evidence at this point, that it changes everything, changes who you are to yourself, who you are to others, in your world, in your more intimate relationships. In other words, it just is totally encompassing of all aspects of life. So what greater investment than to learn this process that gives you the ability to develop the awareness, number one, and then the tools for bringing yourself back into alignment like that.
Well, and the other thing, the other positive aspect is that the more people learn to love themselves, the more they're able to manifest what they want in their lives. Because we don't manifest what we want when we're anxious or scared or depressed or avoidant or shut down or angry. We just can't manifest from that frequency. That's a low frequency.
Yes.
In order to manifest, we have to be in the high frequency of peace and love and joy. And so the more we learn to love ourselves, the more we operate out of that frequency. And then we find that it's so much easier to manifest the life that we want. My experience is that we're co-creators with spirit,
That's
but
right.
that if our heart is closed, which happens when our intention is to control and protect and avoid, the spirit has no way to manifest with us. But when our intention is to learn about love, our heart opens, our being opens, and spirit has a way of helping us manifest what we want. And so for me, it's been amazing. It's been so amazing. I can't even tell you how amazing it's been to be able to manifest the life that I've dreamed of. And I see this happening over and over with the people that I work with.
What a joyful position to be in, really. But it's a self-expressed reality, right? And it's, I guess, evidence of what you have manifested coming from that high vibrational frequency of self-love. So I believe as well, if we really want to manifest the lives that we actually want to live, and those experiences that are going to be nurturing and nourishing to us and give us opportunities to do the same for others, it has to come from the highest vibrational frequency that we can manage at that time. So one of the things that I'd like to dive into, because I know this is the basis of a lot of question and a lot of fear. All right, you and I both know, Margaret, that in this journey there are going to be times that we have to make tough decisions and choices based on the decision to create something different than what we have been experiencing.
Right.
And this seems to be the greatest fear I know that people relate to me.
Yeah.
And it's also the source of a tremendous amount of resistance.
Right.
So talk to us about coming to that place where you are recognizing that the path of self-love is the path of changing your direction and becoming proactive then in creating what it is that you want to experience. And for our audience sake, of course, this can be a job, it can be a friend, it can be family, it can be a lover, a husband, it can be a community, right?
That's right.
So, all right, tell us, how do we deal with that?
Well, this was the biggest challenge in my life that I had, because when inner bonding came in and I started to do the process, my inner child yelled at me one day and let me know that I was completely abandoning her. And I was quite sick at the time. I was going to doctors. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They told me that my immune system was shutting down. They told me that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was likely going to die. I was getting really sick, which was confusing because I had been eating well for a very long time. And I thought as long as I ate, organic and all that, I'd be fine, but I wasn't. And so one day this voice came up from inside me. I allowed the voice to come up, and she said, "How sick do I have to make you before you even know I'm here? How sick do I have to make you before you pay attention to me and give me what you've been giving everybody else?" Because I was the caretaker. I was taking care of my husband, my kids, my parents, my clients, everybody. I was drained from it because, when you give to others, you expect them to give back, and then they don't. They just take more and more and more. So I heard that voice and I said, if I don't learn to love myself, I am going to die. Like a lot of people do. They get real sick. They get cancer. They die when they abandon themselves that much. So that day, and I'll never forget it because it was life-changing for me, I made two decisions. One decision was I was willing to be hurt because all that time I was protecting against being hurt with all my controlling behavior, all my caretaking, which I thought was loving, but was really controlling. And the second decision I made, which was really tough, is that I was willing to lose everybody else, but I was no longer willing to lose me. And I was absolutely terrified to start to love myself because I was so afraid that the people who said they loved me, my husband, my kids, my parents, friends, really didn't. That they just loved how I was giving to them, but they didn't really care about my happiness at all. And unfortunately for me, that's exactly what happened. I lost my 30-year marriage. My children were angry with me, and my parents actually disowned me. So it was a really, really tough time in my life, but I got me back. I got my health back. I got my vitality, my creativity, my aliveness, even with all the grief of the loss. I felt joy for the first time in my life because I was not only loving me, but I was able to receive love. I was able, not trying to get it from others all the time, but I was able to feel that love of spirit coming down inside of me and filling me up with that love. And so I would do the same thing again, even though it was so hard, because those decisions were the most life-changing decisions I ever made. And of course, it took courage, but I said to myself, either I'm going to die or I'm going to take this risk. Now, not everybody is faced with those two choices, but lots of times people are faced with the choices of do they love themselves and risk losing others? Or are they going to continue to try and control others by giving themselves up? So yeah, it's a moment of choice. And I'm so glad that I made that choice.
I can't thank you enough for sharing that. First off, your story is resonating with me so much, and we actually could be both sides of the same page. Same thing, 30-year marriage, and making that very painful decision to walk away. And I remember the therapist that I was working with at the time said to me, and these words will never leave me, and they continue to guide me very often, and that is, you have to be willing to risk it all in order to have it all.
That's right. That's right.
And, I share that, of course, with my clients as well. And I think when we're talking about self-love, that's exactly where we need to get, where we are making ourselves and the relationship with ourselves and our relationship with the divine aspect of us, the priority in our life, so that we truly can then be who we came here to be, right? And it's not about the hat you wear. It's about how you're meant to be in the world and how you're meant to express and give and receive love. Because what else is there? What else could be more important than giving and receiving love?
Right. But we have to know that we're worth it. And one of the things that people learn in inner bonding is how to define who they really are intrinsically, not their looks, not their achievements, not approval, not how much money they have or the house they live in or the car they drive or the clothes they wear, but who they are on the inner level, because this is who we really are. And most people have no idea. I didn't. I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought I was bad because I was told I was bad. And I lived from that for so long. But with practicing inner bonding, I learned to see myself through the eyes of love, through the eyes of truth, which is the higher guidance. So I learned to see that true soul, that inner self. And then that allowed me to start to see the true souls, the true selves of others. And
Mm.
so when I work with people, I don't I don't see them so much as the outer. I see who they are on the inner. And of course, this is what needs to happen in our society because so often, I mean, I think things like racism, is because people are looking on the outer instead of on the inner. If they were able to see their own souls, the beauty of their soul, that their soul is a spark of the divine, then they would know that everybody is, and they would be able to see that divine spark in everybody. And then they would not be judging people on, from externals. And I think this is what needs to happen. I mean, certainly we need legislation, things like that, but I think that each person needs to be able to know how beautiful they are in their inner level, not because they have a certain color skin or they have so much money or whatever, but because they have that divine spark, that unique expression of spirit within them, and we each do. And when we can see that in ourselves, we can see that in each other and relate to each other that way rather than just externally. So to me, this is vitally important, not just for ourselves and our relationships, but for our whole society.
So, it's interesting that we've come back to that place of judgment, and how important it is to realize when we are in judgment,
Mm.
realize the separation that it creates, and realize that it's not based on any truth whatsoever,
Mhm.
regardless of what you are judging, right? There is no truth to it. So, this correlation then between developing this conscious awareness about how important it is to let go of judgment so that you can finally deeply connect with that divine aspect of you. It would sound to me like judgment may be one of the greatest barriers that we have to recognizing our true self.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. That's one of the main ways that we abandon ourselves. Most of us have learned to judge ourselves. And then when we judge ourselves, we make ourselves feel terrible. We loathe ourselves. And then what happens is we project that self-loathing out onto people who may be different than us, whether, it's women or gays or somebody of a different race. We project that out, and that creates all these social problems. Whereas when we really learn how to see who we are and define who we are, when I became aware that most of my anxiety was coming from self-judgment. I thought it was coming from other people's judgment. I thought it was coming from my thinking that somebody didn't like me and that was causing my anxiety, but that wasn't true. It was coming from my own self-judgment. And when I realized the connection between my anxiety and my guilt and my shame, and my self-judgment, then I started to notice. See, and noticing brings awareness. I started to notice that every time I felt anxious or guilty or shamed, what was I telling myself? And it was always a judgment there. And over time of being aware of that, I stopped judging. Boy, that makes a huge difference in life when you stop judging yourself. And so, it's an awareness process. It's a part of the inner bonding process. And most people are just doing it automatically. They don't even know that they're judging themselves. They don't even know then they're projecting their self-judgments out onto other people and thinking it's the other people, but it's really coming from themselves. And this is a huge change when people become aware of that.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, how self-love and judgment are so closely related. And the conditions that we place on ourselves and the conditions that we place on others, the expectations that we place on ourselves, the expectations that we place on others, that can never be fulfilled
Right.
if we are constantly separate from the truth of our being. So this is the key. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that this inner bonding is like the key to it all, right?
Yep.
For your happiness, your health, your well-being, your success in every aspect of life, including those most important relationships with others.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because obviously, that once we begin to love ourselves and we see who we really are, that's when we're really capable of love. And like you said, what is more important than that? I mean, one of the things that I became aware of is that every time I felt anxiety and I tuned in, I was saying things to myself like, you better do everything right. You better not make a mistake. You better be perfect. And I thought, my God, if I said that to my kids, let's say my one of my daughter or one of my sons, if I would have said to them before going to a party, now listen, you have to say everything right. You have to do everything right. They all have to like you or you're not okay. They'd be like this. They'd be terrified of any public situation. Well, so was I. I was anxious about everything because I was putting this pressure on myself. Do it right, say it right, don't make mistakes, don't fail, be perfect. Oh my God, I would never do that to somebody else. I would never treat somebody else the way I was treating myself. And so as I became aware, and I was saying, you're not good enough, you're bad, you'll never be good enough. I would never say those things to somebody. And so as I became aware that this is how I was treating myself, and I stopped doing it, instead started to comment on my intrinsic qualities. I'm a kind person. I'm a caring person. I'm a good human being. I never set out to hurt people ever. I never have in my whole life. And so when I started to say to myself, well, it's okay. You can make mistakes. It doesn't mean anything. It's just part of life. Or you're already perfect. You're a spark of the divine. So if you mess up, no big deal. I'm going to love you anyway. How that changed everything for me. Telling that inner self, that inner child, that I was going to love her because I knew who she is. I knew her goodness. I know her goodness. I know her kindness. I know her caring. So if she messes up, she messes up. No big deal. So today it's a whole new world for me because I totally allow myself to mess up. I can fall on my face. I can do it wrong. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't reflect on my worth as a human being. And that's what changes life. When you can just be a human being, when you can mess up, fail, make mistakes, make a fool out of yourself. I'm fine with making a fool out of myself because I know that it doesn't reflect on who I am. And I've learned throughout the day to comment like I would to a child if I was mirroring their essence. I'll comment to my own inner child. I'll say, oh, honey, thank you so much for that kind gesture. Oh, thank you for that creative thought. Oh, I just love that. And I'll comment on that rather than all the judgments that I used to have. And I remember the moment that I realized this. I'm an artist, and I did a painting that I just loved the painting. And I was standing there just enjoying the painting, and I heard that critical voice saying, yeah, but it's a fluke. You'll never do it again. That's exactly what the voice said. And I went, oh, and all that joy in it just went away. And then I thought, what am I telling myself? And I realized what I was doing. And that's when I started to pay attention to telling myself the positive things like, hey, I love this painting. Thank you for your creativity. That's it.
Amazing. Really amazing. I have a question for you. What happens to others when we stop blaming ourselves?
Well, sometimes people see the joy we're in. Sometimes they see the health we're in. Sometimes they see our creativity, our manifestation. Sometimes they say, what are you doing? I want some of what you've got. I have people say that to me all the time. I mean, that's the best way to teach is to be a role model. And people say to me, I want the joy you have. I want the vitality you have. I want the aliveness. I want the health. I don't know if you know this, Marcy, but I'm 81 years old.
I know you're gorgeous. You're so gorgeous.
Wow, so much vitality. And my brain is clear, and I don't have any of the problems that people my age have. And so very often, older people will say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I love to tell them, because people don't have to get old and get sick and lose their aliveness and their passion and their vitality. So the very best thing we can do is be role models.
Yes, 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 yes. I love all of that. And what a incredibly beautiful reflection you are of all of your beliefs, all of your teachings, and of course, all of your wishes for everyone in this world. I know that your desire is to share what you have found with everyone. No prerequisites, right? All it takes is an open heart and a willingness to surrender all of that control and need to beat yourself up and move on. So this inner bonding, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time together, but I just wanted to jump back for a second, because I recall that you said that it had 6 steps to it. Would you mind just outlining those for people so that they understand, what this journey is going to be for them?
Yeah, so I'll go very brief. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to get the fullness of it. The first step is learning to get present in your body with your feelings, because if you don't know what you feel, then you can't go from there. So it's learning to get present, wanting responsibility for your feelings. Second step is moving into your heart, opening to learning instead of wanting to control, and learning to access that love and that compassion that you can bring into your body from your higher guidance. And the third step is a dialogue process where you're asking, like you would ask an upset child, tell me, what's wrong. So on the inner level, we're saying, what am I telling you? How am I treating you that's causing you to feel this way? Or what's happening between you and another person or a situation? And we're going in and getting the information. And then we're going a little deeper into the part of us that has false beliefs. And so, why am I treating myself this way? Where did I get these beliefs? Why do I continue to believe that? And we're uncovering these limiting beliefs that we have. And then in the fourth step, where I teach people how to access their higher guidance. We're asking 2 questions. What is the truth about any of these beliefs, and what would be loving to me? And once we get that information in step 5, we take whatever the action is that would be loving to ourselves. And then in step 6, we tune back in, we evaluate. And if we've indeed been loving to ourselves, we're going to feel a deep sense of relief. We're going to feel so much better as a result of taking that loving action. So that's very briefly these 6 steps. Anybody can learn them if they want to. They are a roadmap. They're not exclusive of any other processes that people want to bring into their life. It's not like, oh, this is it. This is the only way. This is the only thing you need to do. I encourage people, any form of meditation, spiritual practice, any kind of physical practice, trauma therapy, anything else they want to bring in is fine. But these 6 steps are really powerful and really vital for learning to love yourself.
I'm sure everyone in our audience is truly understanding how important this is and the power of it. And the word that came to my mind is sheer freedom.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. This is freedom. People sometimes think that taking care of themselves is a burden. They don't realize what an incredible freedom it is, Marcy. And I'm so glad you came up with that word, because that is what it is.
It's the way I'm feeling, just listening to you and, recognizing all of the unlimited possibilities that this course, can give to people, and all of their own potential that will be realized because of it. I can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing. I feel so aligned, and I'm so happy that we had this time together and that I can support you in this. And 100%, just endorse every single aspect of it. And I want you to know how honored I am to be here with you, how much joy that I feel bubbling up inside of me. And yeah, please tell people how they can find you and this incredible program. And also, any last words that you might have for them?
Okay, so if people go to innerbonding.com and they can take my free 7-day course, they can sign up for the free journal, any way to get on our mailing list, they will be notified of my upcoming course, which is going to start June 3rd. It's a weekly 8-week course where I will be teaching this process to people virtually. So
Wow.
yeah,
So you are teaching this course.
right.
Wow. What
Yeah.
an opportunity, people. Oh my God.
Yeah, and so if they get on my mailing list, they're going to get a free ebook that will really help them with the process. Um, it's about 4 ways that people block their self-love and their relationships, and then I'll be doing a free webinar that's about 3 secrets to loving yourself and others, and you're going to find out about all of this. And then the course will be coming up, like I said, June 3rd. And it's not that expensive, and there's a payment plan. If people really want to learn how to love themselves, this is a great opportunity for them to learn to do that. And like I said before, anybody can learn to do this if they want to. It's not like you have to be particularly gifted or talented. I'm not particularly gifted or talented in accessing spirit. I grew up with an atheist family. I didn't believe any of it, but I've learned to do that, and I'm connected just about all day.
Yeah.
Guidance. So anybody can learn to do this. And what I really want people to know is that this is so life-changing for you. This is so basic to wanting to change everything else in your life, your health, your relationships, your peace, your joy, your well-being. So I really encourage you to learn this process.
It's absolutely incredible. And the fact that you are actually teaching this online is just going to be such an incredible opportunity for people. I mean, imagine being able to dive into this material, have the creator there, teaching the material. As you know, you can ask your questions, get
Yeah,
your questions answered in real time,
right.
and get the expertise of this woman, this incredible icon, right, of self-love. Um, they're with you, step by step. They're with all of these 6 steps and more.
Yes, you'll be
So,
learning
so
step.
much more. I can feel it. It just sort of oozes from you. And I think you're very much like me. You can't even help yourself, right?
People will be able to ask questions. I'll be doing demonstrations with people. They'll
Yeah.
see the process at work. And I just got a little sign that my battery is low. I forgot to
Uh,
plug my phone.
So we're going to head out. Opportunity of a lifetime. Take advantage of it. And again, thank you so very much. And thank you everyone for tuning in and reaching for what it is that you both want and need. Mwah. Much love to you all. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everyone.